Right. Hello and welcome back to the Mike's On with College Football podcast. It has been way too long since we've spoken, and a lot of that's on me, but looking to have a lot of content coming to you guys this November as we head into the meat, the cream of the crop of this college football season. Had a really big week 10 this weekend. A lot of great games were on, couple upsets, and we're going to dive right into it. Have a couple notables that I really wanted to highlight here before we even entered, and most of these games happened actually before the weekend. App State playing Coastal Carolina on Friday night, or Thursday night rather. Close game back and forth. Always a nice game between App State and Coastal. App State has really struggled to move the ball through the air in the past few weeks and has committed at some spots to just pounding the rock in the run game. In my opinion, they probably do have the best offensive line in the Sun Belt. However, sometimes it seems they don't lean on it too much. Well, Coastal had the answer for him here. App State averages about 2 yards per rush on the ground. Really struggles to put one foot in front of the other there. And Coastal gets a nice pick. App throws a pick late that Coastal puts to the 1 yard line that really puts Coastal ahead by 3 scores. And App just wasn't able to close the gap down the stretch. So Coastal's pretty much in the driver's seat for the Sun Belt East title at this point. App drops to 5-4. They've got 3 games left to get bowl eligible. Should happen for the Mountaineers, completing the North Carolina clean sweep of all 7 North Carolina Division, or all 6 of the 7 North Carolina Division I teams getting to be bowl eligible this bowl season. Another notable from the weekday games, Duke getting bowl eligible, speaking of, over a depleted Boston College team who is extremely game with their backup quarterback throwing for over 300 yards in this game. Boston College being down multiple offensive linemen, their starting quarterback did not give up. Duke was ready to rock, and their quarterback had almost 100 yards rushing, if not more than that. And Boston College didn't flinch. They kept fighting, clawed to the end, scored, tried an onside kick, didn't get it. Them's the breaks. But Duke, first year under Mike Elko, complete what I thought was going to be a total strip it to the studs rebuild year, has coalesced nicely. They've got an experienced offensive line with a lot of transfers, very senior heavy, and they run the rock. Duke is running the ball very well against teams that I guess they can run the ball against, but if Duke can run, they're running their quarterback, which opens up a lot in their pass game. Duke is now 6-3 and will look to extend their winning number. They could get all the way up to 9. I'd probably think 8-4 is more realistic for this Duke team, as they have some tough ones down the stretch. But hey, Duke getting back to a bowl game. It's been since 2018. So it's been a few years off for this Duke team to be able to get to a bowl game. So nice just first-year head coach Mike Elko doing it for the Blue Devils. Did not expect that at all, and tip of the cap to him there. Another one in the weeknight slate, and another team that could maybe go bowling, the UConn Huskies. Speaking of back from the dead, this was a team that 2 to 3 years ago, after they were officially announced that they were going to go independent once the Big East kind of folded, there was questions about should they even fund the team? Should they drop down to FCS? What is the point of UConn playing football? They started losing a ton. Last year, they lose to Holy Cross at home, and their coach kind of half quits, half is fired, mutual parting of the ways there. and they hired Jim Mora Jr. in the offseason. Didn't think much of it. Hey, it's UConn football. If they can win 4 games, that'd be fine. UConn is now 5-5 with a win over UMass and a second-half shutout in that game this past weekend. They have now crowned themselves the Kings of New England, which, hey, if you're UConn, you are taking all good publicity to the bank. This UConn team does not throw it well at all. They do love to run the rock. They ground and pound all over the field. They've got 2 games left. They've got Army and Liberty left to try to get to 6 wins and be bowl eligible. I don't know what their bowl ties are, but 6 wins is 6 wins. Liberty, who's we'll get to later, is pretty good. I don't know if it'll happen there, but Army is definitely gettable after, nice segue here, they lost to Air Force today. 10:30 Central kick in Arlington, Texas today. Air Force takes on the Army Black Knights in the Texas Rangers baseball stadium, known for its terrible acoustics. Yes, this was a 10:30 local game, finished around 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 local. And if you don't know by now, I'll let you know now, the under in point totals for academy games, that is Army, Navy, Air Force, when they get together, is 35-9-1, something close to that. When those academy teams play, you take the under to the bank. The total on this game was set at 40. Air Force wins 13-7. I'm not a great math guy, but that's going to take the under 100 out of 100 times. What Air Force did right here, well, these academy games are always different. They can't really run their base stuff against each other because they all just run triple option in practice so much, so their defenses are very used to it. There's a lot actually more passing in these matchups than you kind of would guess from Jump Street. Really, Air Force was able to limit Army in the field, and because these games are normally just one possession anyway, it kind of just, we're whittling the clock down, clock close, clock, and then whoever ends up with the ball at the end, if you are the losing team, you kind of are forced into a 2-minute situation, and it's what can you do from there. Army was in a 2-minute situation, ball with 90 seconds left. They had 1 or 2 timeouts and couldn't really matriculate the ball down the field as you wouldn't expect a triple option team to do. And so Air Force comes away with the win and the Commander-in-Chief's trophy, for beating both Army and Navy this year. I think the first time since 2016 that they have won the Commander-in-Chief trophy. So good on Air Force there. Earlier in the season, Air Force was our Mountain West Group of 5 darling as they started the season real hot with a lot of expectations, but injury and actually sickness to some of the guys on the team there really limited them in some of the games. They dropped one to Wyoming and then another one in conference that just kind of took the wind out of their sails a little bit, but nice win for them there. The Commander-in-Chief trophy is really what these service academies care about. They're still fighting to win for the conference, but Boise State's got 2 games on them, so not looking too hot there. Elsewhere, and that'll do it for the week. Gonna get into Saturday's games. Started off with a big one today. TCU playing against, oh boy, I knew I would forget this. TCU played Texas Tech at home today. Texas Tech is a really fun team if you haven't checked them out recently. They go for it every single time on 4th down, pretty much give or take. If it's inside 5 yards to go on 4th down, Texas Tech is going for it. And this game was pretty back and forth. I kind of got into this one a little late, was doing some stuff in the morning, and TCU was down or tied when I tuned it on, and I was pretty shocked that Texas Tech was making a game out of it. And again, this TCU team, who I think deserves to be top 4 in the playoff standings, they just keep winning games. And there's something to be said about that. A team that they're undefeated at this point, they're 9-0. A team that, yes, are they playing perfect? Absolutely not. Do they allow the other team to score? Is that defense pretty leaky? Absolutely. Are they pretty explosive on offense and can put up the points to combat that leaky defense? Absolutely. Is the offense rolling every single time and extremely efficient? Of course not. Do they rely on those big hitter plays to really help them keep and stay and sometimes get ahead in those games? Yes. Do they make it? Do they have it when they need it? That is absolutely what this TCU team is. When they need to reach for the fastball, they got it. They had their top receiver go down in this game, and they started running it more with the quarterback and running back, and were able to adjust their offense in a time where things were looking a little shaky and still pull out the win there. That TCU team has got some special about it. They've still got Texas and I think Baylor to go down the stretch. So it's not over by any means with this Big 12 schedule. But week in, week out, I've been on TCU for a little while now in terms of how much I've really enjoyed watching them play and think they're actually a good team. They know what they need to do to win, and they do it. It's not pretty every week, but they win. So you have to admire that. Elsewhere on the noon slate, we had UNC visiting Virginia. Was kind of liking what UNC was doing on defense recently, but it still looks like the cure for a bad offense is the UNC defense, because Virginia did end up with 28 points here. Bit of a slow start for UNC and Drake May out of the gate. A lot of drops from receivers. This UNC team, despite their success and that there are good players on the field and they are playing well, I still think they aren't well coached. And they're a team that their game ability or their intensity level from game to game is a very fluctuating scale. And I think this is another one where they got caught a little sleepy. On the road in a place where, Charlottesville on a Saturday at noon really isn't a raucous crowd either, so there's not that energy that you're looking for there. Kind of got caught on the road napping, but rallied and held the ball for the last 5 minutes to seal the victory away. They win 31-28. UNC will now head to Wake Forest next week for a game in maybe the billions in terms of total points. But looking forward to that one next week. Drake May for Heisman, man. I was skeptical early because it was like, could he really be this good? And yet, no, he's that good. He does things. He is smarter. He's putting the ball in places where his receivers sometimes don't expect it, but it's the right place regardless. He's making pro throws, and he's a redshirt freshman. So, and there's another thing, real quick. People keep calling him a freshman in the media and stuff. He did redshirt last year. It's his second year of the program. Yeah, did he only play one half against Wofford? Sure. Did he have a lot of experience anywhere else? No. I think he took a couple snaps throughout some blowouts when UNC had them last year. But this is his second year. It's not like this is his first year in the offense. He took reps as the backup in practice last season. So, yeah, when you look at it that way, it makes sense that he's got this amount of command of the offense. He also worked behind Sam Howell last year, who is a NFL caliber quarterback drafted by the Redskins. So, if you look at it in that way, it doesn't look like he came out of the blue as much. I do wish national media, when talking about guys who are redshirt freshmen, would say that, because it highlights the fact that, it's their second year. They didn't play much last year, but they've done a year of training in college and camp and all that stuff, which means a lot. It does mean a lot. Elsewhere around the country at noon, we had or not so much at noon. This was at 3:30. The University of Tennessee going to Athens, Georgia. The SEC CBS game of the week. And I was really looking forward to Tennessee, maybe not putting on the exact show they did against Alabama, but this was, it was Tennessee's. We were going to find out if it was Tennessee's year right here. And what really didn't help was the rain. This game got really sloppy in terms of the weather. And initially from the jump, it was going to be, can Georgia's front four get pressure without blitzing? And if they can pressure Hendon Hooker without having to bring extra defenders, they can commit a lot more people in man coverage, or at least two deep cover safeties and man underneath, to handle this Tennessee passing attack. And they were. It was pretty evident from the jump that Georgia's defensive line, who had been not so great rushing the passer throughout the season so far, they just, they had some dudes last year. They were good stopping the run, but in terms of getting real pressure on the quarterback, weren't really there. They created a lot of tight pockets for Hendon Hooker to stand in. He looked very uncomfortable, and Tennessee really struggled to put one foot in front of the other and grind out yards. Even despite Georgia fumbling it late in the third quarter, back to Tennessee after Tennessee fumbled it, it was still it got to a point where you get late in the game and it was like, oh, they're really just not going to be able to score. UGA did a great job of grinding clock, especially in the end of the first half. They consumed, I think, almost all of the last 7 to 8 minutes of the first half, coming down and kicking a field goal to extend the game. I think it was 24-6 at the half. And then the second half was just so rainy and mucky. It goes final at 27-13. And what I really noticed from Tennessee, obviously then Georgia's doing, because they're getting so much pressure with their front four, they're able to commit more players downfield to defend the pass. But at some point, Tennessee, you got to throw the ball up, right? Like I don't care if there's double coverage, if he's got two guys or a guy's lurking there, like the ball's just got to come out. I mean, I think Hooker was taking a ton of sacks in the second half, waiting to throw the ball. And eventually, like I personally, and this has nothing to do with good football, but I would rather see my quarterback just get rid of the ball and put it in play for a receiver. If it's picked, it's picked. If you throw it 40 yards downfield and it gets picked, it's an arm punt. Fine. But I would, especially on like third down, just get it out of there. You know the pressure's coming. Just chuck it up, not out of bounds. Like, give someone a try. And I get it's hard. Like, hey, look, I'm not standing back there with 300-pound dudes coming at me, and I never want to be in that situation. But I would rather see my quarterback at least get rid of the ball into the field of play so something can happen. Because at that point in the game, it's 24-6. You're struggling to find anything on offense. You've just got to get the ball in play. At least get the ball in play, and we'll see what happens. But Georgia wins. They storm the field. This pretty much seals up the Eastern Division now for Georgia. They've only got 2 more conference games left before they dismantle Georgia Tech on the field at the end in good old-fashioned hate. So it looks like Georgia is going to face whoever comes out of the West, because that came into question again today. We'll touch on that later. Again, another afternoon game. Syracuse at Pitt. Syracuse, starting out 6-0, have now lost 2 straight. They are a bit depleted on the defensive line. I think they had 8 or 9 guys out for the season to start this game. They're on their backup quarterback. They're down 2 defensive linemen. They're out a receiver. Not so great. The Syracuse team wasn't deep to begin the season. Didn't think they'd go 6-0, and now they're really having to lean on their backups, and they ain't getting it done. Pitt, try as they might, really wanted to give Syracuse this game. Pat Narduzzi still doesn't like to throw the ball and would rather grind the game of football into dust and oblivion than put a lot of points on the board. Pitt actually accomplishes what I think very few teams have ever done. They punted for 2 yards, and the punt was not blocked. It was not tipped. The punter got the snap. He dropped the ball and barely clipped the nose of the ball with the toe of his boot, and it dribbled for a 2-yard punt. And that was late in the game with Pitt up 19-6 with about 7 minutes left on the clock. Syracuse converted it for a field goal to put it to 19-9. Or no, I think it was 16-6 at that point, and they made it 16-9 to get to one score. And Pitt later adds a field goal to kind of push the game out of reach. Gross game for Pitt, but this is the Pitt team that we know is just going to be disgusting this year. I am very ashamed that Pat Narduzzi has taken something that was so beautiful in Pitt's offense last season and completely torn it apart. It really hurts my soul to see a coach dismantle an offense because he just doesn't like points and passing. But hey, he gets paid the big bucks and I don't. Elsewhere around the country in the afternoon was Baylor at Oklahoma. A very fun Big 12 shootout. Hadn't had one of these in a little bit. I think Oklahoma State, Texas, you could say, was a bit of a shootout, but that one was like a lot of points early and no points late. We haven't had a nice, steady Big 12 shootout in a good while, and this one was. Final goes 38-35 to Baylor. This is Baylor versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma is still trying to get that defense right. After they got manhandled earlier in the season by both TCU and Texas, they've kind of had, I think, to simplify things defensively. Brett Venables is a great defensive mind, but I still think it's a work in progress in putting all of the scheme and pieces in place on the defense to really do what he wants to do defensively. I just don't think not all the chess pieces are on the board there. And they do struggle against the run, which, if you know this Baylor team, they like to ground it out against you. And that's exactly what Baylor did to seal this game. They have the ball with 3 minutes left and hold the ball, converting multiple first downs. They actually bust a long run, 3rd and 2, run it straight up the middle, wide open, nobody's there. And the running back smartly goes down at the 10-yard line and does not score to give Oklahoma the ball back, and they knee it out from there. Oklahoma's still a work in progress. Baylor has a freshman quarterback. They've suffered some injuries this year. Repeating what they did last year, I knew was going to be tough, so I didn't expect that. They could still bounce back and have a nice 8-4 season if they rally at the end of this year here. But a nice Big 12 shootout there in the middle of the day amongst all these games that were a bit grindy and low scoring was nice to see. Another grindy, low-scoring game, but this time over to the American. University of Central Florida at Memphis. I've watched a lot of UCF football this season. Their quarterback John Reese Plumlee is a lot of fun to watch. He's basically a glorified running back at quarterback. He's got MLB center field speed. I mean, the dude can fly and makes people miss on many occasion. He was a little banged up last week, and I think he either got knocked out of this game or didn't play at all. But despite that, UCF was able to kind of lean on Memphis here and play the slow game and take care of business in Memphis, who was really looking for a big win here. I mean, Memphis has been very up and down all season. They entered the game 4-4, and a big win at home against a top conference rival here would have really it would have been the sweet moment they would have been looking for to kind of really make this season have a moment to it, and weren't able to pull it off. Interesting to see what goes on in Memphis after this. They're 4-5. The opportunity to make a bowl game is still there, but as the American Conference shifts, are they looking to make a change at head coach? to be a part of the new class of the American and be on top of the conference. So interesting to see what happens there. And, Auburn is now looking for a head coach, and UCF has a coach that has ties to Auburn University, knows the SEC very well, and could probably plug in and do very well there. So we'll see if that's where they go. If you know, you know. Elsewhere, we had Liberty at Arkansas. Now, this was a game I had circled because as a Wake Forest fan, I got to see Wake play Liberty, and Liberty neutralized Wake's running game. Absolutely stopped them from being able to run the ball entirely. Wake gets out of there by the skin of their teeth, 37-36, stopping Liberty on a 2-point conversion for the win. So Liberty's defense was holding Arkansas to a lot of punts early. It was back and forth. Liberty was also struggling to block Arkansas on the defensive side, so it was kind of a punt fest early on, and Liberty kind of breaks it open to get to 21-3 at the half. And then the game goes final 21-19. I didn't get that many eyes on it down the stretch, but I know Liberty gets the win in Arkansas by stopping a 2-point conversion from Arkansas to tie the game late. This makes Liberty 8-1. Their head coach Hugh Freeze, who, if you're new to college football, I wouldn't say he's like the best individual to model your career after or as a person. But if you're not, you know who he is. You know that he's a snake oil salesman. Liberty is pretty interesting. They're going to be joining Conference USA next year after being in the independent ether for a little while now. And they also extended his contract. It was like 8 years, $60 million or something like that, to hopefully retain him. Obviously, if a big team wants him, they're going to buy him out of his contract regardless of the amount of money that Liberty can put forward. But what this really does is set up Liberty to be probably finish at 11-1 down the stretch. I know Liberty has they're gonna have Army and UMass. Let's check them out real fast. Let me see Liberty. Eight and 1, great season for the Flames. Yeah, they've got okay. I know. So they have UConn. They're gonna go to Virginia Tech, and then they're gonna have New Mexico State, and New Mexico State. Oh, Virginia Tech and New Mexico State are home. So at UConn, home against Va-Tech, and home against New Mexico State. Va-Tech is terrible. They lost to Georgia Tech today after they were up for most of the game. Virginia Tech goes forward on 4th down in Georgia Tech territory and ends up throwing an interception or just doesn't get the 4th down. And Georgia Tech goes down to score and go up 29-28, and that game goes final at 29-28. Fighting Yellow Jackets of Georgia Tech under interim coach Brett Key, who, if you're unaware, is an alumnus of Georgia Tech and has pretty much, I think he is an auditioning for the job of head coach for next season, and probably they'd be able to get him on the cheap. So if he shows some promise this season as they close out their season, I think Brent Key might be the guy in, at least for maybe a short-term period, in Atlanta going forward. But yeah, big win there for Liberty. They've got one more Power 5 game on the schedule. I expect Liberty to be ranked probably at 25 in the college at least in the AP poll, if maybe not the college football playoff standings. But yeah, huge win for Liberty. If you don't like Liberty, you don't like Liberty, but in terms of the players on that squad, that's huge for them. Elsewhere, we had so another big game. we'll get into the night slate here. Real quick, Marshall, Old Dominion. Marshall wins 12-0. Their offense is gross. Their defense is amazing. Old Dominion really can't move the ball unless it's the penalty offense or they just hit a big play. Marshall ends up just they've kind of really leaned into this aesthetic that they're just not a good offense and they're just going to try to grind and wear on you. They're not playing their transfer fifth-year quarterback and are now leaning and playing some true freshmen or redshirt freshmen at quarterback and prepping for the future. Marshall is 5-4. They are pretty much out of contention for the Sun Belt East, but from what I've gathered so far, have the top recruiting class in the Sun Belt East. So positive sparks going into next season for a pretty up and down season so far at Marshall. So nice to see them get the win there. On the road, though, I think at home they've been absolutely abysmal. Most of their wins have been on the road. Funny game, football. Anyway, night slate. Back to the SEC, we talked about who is going to be playing Georgia in the SEC championship coming out of the West. Well, we had an absolute banger of a game in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, night game in Death Valley, Bama at LSU. This game was a huge back-and-forth haymaker of a game that didn't really start until the second half because both teams came out and defensively were all over the respecting offense. LSU played great coverage on the back end and really limited Alabama's ability to move the ball through the air. And Alabama, this has been a consistent through line with Alabama that their receiving talent what do you want? Last year or 2 seasons, last year they had multiple first-round talent, or 2 seasons ago it was in 2020. They had multiple first-round picks at wide receiver. They don't anymore, or at least right now they don't. Maybe those guys develop. I don't know. But as we are right now, they just don't got those dudes playing wide receiver this year. So they can't just chuck it up, and they can't rely just on every single play some guy getting wide open against a safety or whatever. So they're struggling. Jaden Daniels played some of the quarterback for LSU, played some of the best football I've ever seen him play. I saw a lot of him at Arizona State, and it was very inconsistent. Especially the passing game. He's always been more of a natural runner, but to see his command of the offense in this game was pretty stark. I mean, obviously they're running more of a QB run heavy offense, but when he needs to make some throws, they're there, and he's accurate with it. So this game is like 9-7 at the half or something like that, or 6-7 at the half, and the game kind of opens up more in the second half as I guess defenses just get tired and the points start to add up, which is great. We want to see it. Anyway, Alabama scores to lead LSU, and then LSU gets the ball back with about 4 minutes left, and they drive down and they score to make it 21-27. Let me make sure I got this going. Oh, this is great podcasting, Mike. Just people watching you do stuff. That's a bunch of nothing. Gamecast. Oh, beautiful. Play-by-play. Bink. Yes. All right, so at the half, it's 6-7. And as we get into the second half, Alabama scores a touchdown to go up 15-14. So Alabama gets a field goal, and LSU gets a touchdown at this point. LSU drives down to kick a field goal to go up 2, and Alabama drives down to take a touchdown to go up to 21-17. They go for 2 and don't get it. At this point, LSU has the ball with about 4.5 minutes left. They're going to go ahead and drive down, matriculating the ball pretty well. They got a couple nice pass interference penalties on Alabama, who still one of the most penalized Nick Saban teams I've seen all season. You just never see that. It's unusual, especially in my lifetime of watching college football, to see a Nick Saban team that is this penalized this often. I think Alabama ended the game with at least 9 penalties for 90-some plus yards, if not more. LSU gets a touchdown late to take it to 24-21. Alabama counters with a 10-play, 47-yard drive that encompasses 1:26. And as soon as LSU scored their touchdown, I said to myself, too much time. Too much time. Bryce Young is the best quarterback in America. He is the most savvy quarterback in America at the college football level. His ability to keep a play alive is unrivaled. And you could say, oh, C.J. Stroud playing so good. Well, hey, I mean, if we want to talk some C.J. Stroud, Ohio State beat Northwestern today 17-7, and he looked pretty pedestrian against a Northwestern team that was starting to be considered as maybe the worst in the Power 5. So I didn't see any of that game. I need to dig more into that. That'll be something I touch on as we discuss more in the week here. But Bryce Young's ability to consistently dodge pressure but maintain him standing upright, or at least, it's cool if you can juke out a defensive lineman, but then if you just juke yourself into your offensive lineman's shoes and fall down, it's not helpful. He stays upright while dodging pocket traffic, keeping a play alive, and his eyes downfield. He did this multiple times in this game to either get a big play through the air or drawing a holding penalty in the secondary by LSU's defense, because they're just all of a sudden having to cover for like 6-7 seconds because Bryce Young's running around like a chicken with his head cut off back there. And it's not because the offensive line is giving up too much pressure. I mean, they haven't been great, but I mean, he's standing back there and reading, and then the eventually the dam breaks, but he's able to just slip, juke, dive, dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge in that pocket to find someone downfield or run it for himself. He is just the most savvy quarterback at keeping a play alive that I've seen in a good while. Alabama gets the field goal to take it to overtime. Alabama scores in overtime. They get the ball first. They go 7 plays, 25 yards. LSU gets the ball second in the first overtime. And Jaden Daniels on QB Reed goes just out the side door and all the way to the end zone for 25 yards. One play, 25-yard touchdown run by Jaden Daniels. His wide receiver, you can see in the picture, is just blocking the Alabama corner basically into the bench on the sideline. Beautiful to see. And so now you're LSU. You've been playing a heck of a game against, top team in your conference. A game that you have to have if you want to go to the SEC championship game. The crowd is wild. You've played your butt off, and I think your defense at this point is exhausted because Alabama has scored on their past 4 possessions at this point. Touchdown, field goal, touchdown. I think your defense is pretty gassed. You don't really want to extend this game at all. So Brian Kelly goes for the win here, goes for 2 to seal this game up, and they run a nice little play, kind of a read option play with a tight end sneaking out to the flat. Jaden Daniels hits him. He falls into the pylon in the corner. 2-point conversion is successful, and the mayhem ensues. Fans immediately rush I've never seen a field get stormed faster than Alabama LSU. So LSU wins 32-31. They are now tied with they're tied with Ole Miss for the top spot in the conference. We'll check back in with how the SEC West is construed because they beat Ole Miss, but they have a conference loss to Tennessee. Well, they haven't lost an SEC West game, so I guess they are now leaders in the clubhouse in the SEC West. And already have the win against Ole Miss and Bama. So, yeah, if they win out, they're going to Atlanta. Very interesting. Yeah, great game to see. You love to see a Bama LSU game that goes down to the wire like this. It was a lot of fun to watch. Elsewhere in the night slate, we had Wake Forest play NC State. As a Wake fan, I am not happy to say that Sam Hartman decided to throw 3 more interceptions on top of the 3 he threw last week. Wake's offense seems to be extremely lackluster, and NC State was extending drives with penalties, as well as letting Wake not run the ball at all. This seems to be a bit of a trend here. Liberty did it very well in their near win of Wake Forest, where they just essentially, anytime that it was a down and distance where you would expect a run, 1st and 10, 2nd and 5, they just blitzed. They brought everything. And I don't know what's happening with kind of the read mesh that is supposed to be happening with Wake, but what teams are doing is just speeding up that decision-making time. They're not creeping down to the line of scrimmage that you used to see teams do against Wake because they didn't know if it was a run or a pass. They're just saying, screw it. If you're going to run, you're going to run into like 9 bodies that we throw at the offensive line. Or if you're going to throw it, you're going to throw it quick and immediately because we're going to overwhelm the amount of protection that you have for this play. And that seems to be happened not only against Louisville and now against NC State, and it's what Liberty did as well. Wake Forest did a terrible job running the ball, and hats off to NC State. I thought they were a little dead in the water after Leary went down, and they seem to have found their new quarterback in T.J. Morris. That's back-to-back games where he's played. I think the other one he came in relief of the other backup they had. And this game he started, so he's now 2-0 as an NC State quarterback and thrown for about 6 touchdowns. So, hey, it's good to be at NC State. I thought I was counting them out. Hey, they got 6 wins, but they might lose out. No, they're very much alive in this conference to, hey, get 10 wins. They're now 7-2. They still have UNC on deck to play later in the season, and we'll see what happens. But for Wake Forest, what was a promising start to the season and a really close game played against Clemson at home that had a lot of the fan base thinking that, yes, this team is, one of the top in the nation, top 10 ranking in the AP poll. Now they're 6-3. I would say the goals of the season in terms of making a championship are definitely dashed. Also, really, really bitter pill to swallow that Clemson also lost today against Notre Dame. Non-conference game, so it doesn't really matter. But Notre Dame has now beaten both teams at the top of each division in the ACC. They beat UNC earlier in the season and now Clemson. So I guess Notre Dame has won the ACC. Really weird day for the ACC in terms of that. I guess we should just let NC State and UNC battle it out twice and just go from there. But yeah. Wake Forest definitely needs to regroup and retool. Their offense seems to either have been figured out or is extremely stagnating. And for a coach and a system that prides itself on innovation and gaining a schematic advantage over the field, that seems to have not been so over the past few games, especially in conference play. So we will see Wake next week against UNC. Couple games as we close out the night shift here that were very intriguing. Houston at Southern Miss, or not Southern Miss, Southern Methodist University. Um, on paper, I would say this game would have a lot of points, but I didn't think it would have this many points. This game goes final 77-63 for a combined total of 140 points. This is the uncut, straight, put it in my veins, Big 12 shootout stuff that we used to see in the Big 12. Doesn't happen anymore. But hey, in the American Conference, sometimes these teams just do it. And it was gorgeous to watch. Quarterback play. Clayton Tune for Houston, 36 of 53, 527 yards, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Tanner Mordecai for SMU, 28 of 37, 379 yards, and 9 touchdowns. That breaks the record for touchdowns thrown in a game for SMU, if not nationally. I need to check on that. But I caught this game. I saw it at half. It was 56-30 something, and I was like, "Give me more of this, please." Threw it on the third screen and coasted, watching both these teams just tackle who? What? No. We don't need to tackle them. If they score, we get the ball back, and then we get to score. I love that. I love that defensive mentality. Obviously, that's not what the defenders are saying on the field, but that's what sometimes it feels like in these games where it's like, dude, we don't really need to stop them. If we can get the ball back, we're gonna keep scoring. So then it's really about how much clock can we kill. And SMU did a really good job of actually running the ball later in the game to be able to eat more clock and just diminish the amount of time that Houston had to play with. Both these teams kind of in the middle of the pack in the American. Houston was on track maybe to compete for a spot in the conference playoff race, but this loss really sets them back. SMU has been really needing some sort of big victory or satisfying win in recent weeks, sitting at 4-4 in the new Rhett Lashley era, and a drubbing like this, or getting at least, I don't know if a drubbing, but getting into a convincing shootout against an in-state rival who is actually moving up to the Big 12 next season, and you are not, is a nice way to send them off like, you think you're better than me? No, you're not. So yeah, 77-63, guns blazing in Houston, SMU. Been a team I've been following here. We had South Carolina at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, this was their second best opportunity to get a conference win on the season. Their other one was against Missouri, and that didn't happen. And what finally happened for the Cox? We had a good Spencer Rattler sighting. Spencer Rattler did not turn the ball over. He was efficient through the air. He ran when he needed to, and he completed some nice throws. I mean, the guy, I was watching him last week against Missouri, and there was throws that you could watch with Spencer Rattler that he was making at Oklahoma 2 seasons ago with Lincoln Riley that would blow the doors off. Oh my God, this guy's NFL talent, the arm talent's there. He's amazing. And there was throws that he was doing against Missouri that was like, has he just lost it? Like he looked almost shattered. He's been struggling all season. It's been kind of ugly to watch. Now, hey, is it against Vandy? Yeah. Is their defense good? No. Do they have a good defensive line? No. So you get a lot of time to throw the ball, and that's what he had. South Carolina's offensive line has been pretty leaky, both in being able to generate a solid rushing offense as well as protecting Spencer Rattler and keeping him upright. So with this newfound ability that Vandy gave them for him to be able to sit in the pocket a little longer, he was able to make some good throws. So that was nice to see for the future of South Carolina, as maybe they can get some good offensive line talent in through the portal or have some guys on the roster that they're going to bring up. I don't know if he's going to go pro or not. I would think he wouldn't, because I don't know, he just doesn't look like it would be smart for him to put together a season that isn't so inconsistent and up and down. But he's draft eligible, so we'll see what happens. But South Carolina gets to 6-3. They are bowl eligible for the second straight year in the Shane Beamer era, and they still have Clemson on deck. Which, hey, if you can play defense against Clemson that well, like Notre Dame did, then I guess you can beat them. So they look very mortal after today. But good win for the Cox there. You have a good Spencer Rattler, you get good Cox. Last game of the night I was watching, BYU at Boise State. This is a very fun rivalry to keep track of out in the Mountain West, as every year it's a good game. Very grindy early, a lot of leaning and a lot of pushing, playing some ground and pound man ball, but turned into a bit of a shootout late. I mean, this game was like 17-14 entering the fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden, bam, both these teams just started moving the ball a ton, and it became almost a who's going to have the ball last is probably going to win this game. Touchdown, 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 back and forth. BYU gets the last laugh. They get the touchdown with about $1:30 left, forcing Boise State to kind of run 2-minute drill. That's not really their forte at this point. Boise State made a really interesting move in the early part of the season. They fired their offensive coordinator after a terrible showing against University of Texas El Paso in El Paso on the road. And in firing their offensive coordinator, their starting quarterback also announced he was going to enter the transfer portal at the end of the season. He declared a red shirt, so he preserved a year of eligibility. So Boise State went to their backup, who is a more athletic quarterback and a more running-based quarterback. They completely shifted the offense to be more of a running QB-friendly style offense. A lot of zone read, a lot of underneath throws, play action, all that good stuff, and it served them well. They're still, now this is not a conference game, undefeated in conference play. They were 6-2 entering this game. They are now 6-3. But a struggling start for the Broncos that really lended itself to a nice renaissance there up in Boise, Idaho. And, hey, battled it with BYU. This is the best I've seen BYU look all season. They have been battered, bruised, and beaten. Looked disgusting against Liberty last week. Arkansas played them 2 weeks ago, and they looked even worse. ECU beat them a couple weeks ago in Provo. It has not looked good at all for BYU. So to see them go on the road to Boise and get this win was really huge for them. They're now 5-5 on the season, and they've got a cupcake game against Southern Utah coming up. So that'll definitely get them to bowl eligibility as they enter their new life into the Big 12. So that'll pretty much do it for the slate of games I saw this week. I am very sorry for the huge gap in podcasting. I came back from my trip at the beginning of October and really kind of struggled to find my footing again with the podcasting. I still watched a lot of games and collected data for the weeks of the games that I watched. But getting into this week, I think what we're planning on doing is we're going to have maybe one episode a day, and I'm going to try to touch on kind of give you guys an update. If you haven't been so dialed into the season, we're now heading into the last push here in November, the meat of conference season. And I'll kind of guide you through how each conference is looking, who our contenders are, who, kind of top to bottom, where everyone stands, why people are where they are, why people are at the bottom, why they're at the top. We'll probably touch the big conferences first and then get into the group of five. But to kind of give everyone a nice base level of where we stand before we start this final push in November. I've really enjoyed this so far. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to me. We will bring back next week the preview show of the week and start giving you guys a little more in-depth look, not in-depth look, but presenting my game picks for you guys. So we'll be looking at the total, the over-unders, the lines, all that good stuff. and I'll be coming to you with a updated. I need to crunch my numbers and see where I kind of stand on the season, but it's good to be back in the chair. I hope you guys are enjoying it. And I will look to see you guys later in the week as we preview our conferences and get into next week. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Mike Collins with Mike's On with College Football. We'll see you next time.